First contact fallout. The silence on Outpost Epsilon 9 was deceptive. Commander Elia Hayes knew this better than anyone as she paced the perimeter walkway, her boots making calculated, even steps on the metal grating. 20 years of military service had taught her to listen to silence, to read the void of space like others read books. And right now, the silence was screaming. "Anything on long-range scanners, Lieutenant?" she asked, her voice calm despite the growing unease in her gut. Lieutenant Reyes glanced up from his console, dark circles under his eyes betraying the extended shifts they'd all been pulling. "Nothing yet, Commander. But the Aldebaran colony's distress beacon is still active. No communications in or out for 36 hours now." Hayes nodded, her gray eyes fixed on the vast emptiness displayed on the main view screen. Epsilon 9 was humanity's furthest outpost, a reconnaissance station monitoring the border of known space. 3 days ago, they'd detected anomalous energy readings. 2 days ago, they'd lost contact with the research vessel Galileo. Yesterday, Aldebaran, a colony of 15,000 souls, had gone dark. "They're coming," she said simply. Not a question. A statement of fact. The crew glanced at each other nervously. They'd all heard the rumors about the Vozari, the reports from other outposts before they, too, went silent. Crystalline ships that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Beings that communicated through pulses of bioelectric energy rather than sound. A species so alien that attempts at communication had been futile. A species that, as far as anyone could tell, viewed humans as nothing more than vermin to be exterminated. "Commander," called Specialist Zhang from the sensor station, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Multiple objects dropping out of FTL, bearing 045 by 120. They're huge." Hayes was already moving, hands flying over the command console. "Battle stations. Alert New Terra Command. Initiate Protocol Omega." The alarm klaxons began to wail as the crew rushed to their emergency positions. Hayes knew they were outnumbered, outgunned, and with no reinforcements closer than 2 days' journey at maximum burn. But Epsilon 9 was more than just an outpost. It was an early warning system, and as long as they could get a signal out, they could save millions. "Thermal signatures consistent with Vozari vessels," Zhang reported, her voice steadier now. 7 capital ships, at least 24 escorts. They'll be in weapons range in 3 minutes. Hayes straightened her back, a strange calm settling over her. "Lieutenant Reyes, deploy countermeasures. Specialist Zhang, focus all auxiliary power on boosting our distress signal. Ensign Carter, prepare for emergency evacuation protocols." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, even as fear shone in their eyes. They were scientists, explorers, engineers, not soldiers, except for Hayes. She alone had seen combat against the Vozari. She alone had survived their first encounter at Proxima Centauri. The first shots came without warning. Brilliant lances of energy that seemed to bend space itself, striking Epsilon 9's shields with devastating precision. The station shuddered, emergency lights flickering. "Shields at 60%. Reyes called out. "Their targeting systems are. It's like they know exactly where to hit us." Hayes gripped the edge of the command console. "Return fire, all batteries. Randomize shield harmonics. They adapt to patterns. Don't give them one." For 10 minutes, Epsilon 9 held its ground, its defenses more resilient than the Vozari might have expected. Hayes directed their countermeasures with uncanny intuition, anticipating the alien attacks almost before they came. But she knew it was only delaying the inevitable. Aboard the Lid Vozari vessel, Captain Nirik watched the human outpost with growing curiosity. Unlike the others of his kind, he had studied these creatures extensively. Soft-bodied, short-lived, technologically primitive by Vozari standards. Yet they fought with unexpected tenacity. "The defense patterns are unusual," he observed, his thoughts transmitting directly to his command crew through the neural network that connected all Vosari. This one does not follow standard human military doctrine. His second, Krelvan, pulsed acknowledgement. They adapt quickly. This is why the Conclave deems them dangerous. Unpredictable evolution. Narek narrowed his 6 eyes, focusing on the sensor readings. No, this is different. Observe the shield modulations, the weapon targeting. There is purpose here. Intelligence. On Epsilon 9, another barrage rocked the station. Fire erupted from a control panel, quickly suppressed by emergency systems. Hayes wiped blood from a cut on her forehead, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. Shields failing, Rise reported grimly. But the distress signal is confirmed received by New Terra Command. They know what's coming. Hayes nodded. Evacuate the station. All personnel to escape pods. Commander. Rise looked up, startled. That's an order, Lieutenant. Get everyone out. I'll initiate the self-destruct sequence and follow in the command pod. The crew hesitated, but only for a moment. They'd served with Hayes long enough to trust her judgment implicitly. As they rushed to the evacuation points, Hayes worked swiftly, fingers dancing across the console. "What are you doing, Commander?" asked Zhang, pausing at the doorway. Hayes didn't look up. "Giving you a fighting chance. Now go." Alone on the bridge, Hayes abandoned the self-destruct sequence. Instead, she rerouted power to the station's experimental quantum communications array. If she could just keep it operating long enough to transmit the data she'd been gathering on Vosari attack patterns. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Structural warnings blared as atmosphere began venting from multiple compartments. Hayes grimaced, strapping herself into the command chair. She wouldn't be making it to an escape pod. On the Vosari vessel, Narek's attention sharpened. The smaller vessels are departing the station. Escape craft. Shall we intercept? Krelvan asked, weapons systems already aligning. Narek hesitated, his crystalline features catching the light as he tilted his head. No. Let them go. Focus on the station itself. Something is happening there. Captain. The energy signatures. The lone human remaining is reconfiguring their systems, not for destruction, for communication. Krelvan pulsed confusion. They are prey. They flee or they die. This behavior is anomalous. Yes, Narek agreed, fascination growing. Precisely why we must understand it. On Epsilon 9, Hayes worked frantically, ignoring the flames now spreading across the bridge. The station was coming apart around her, but the quantum array was still functioning. Just a few more seconds. The console before her exploded, throwing her backward. Pain lanced through her body as she felt ribs crack, but she dragged herself back to the controls. Blood smeared across the interface as she made the final adjustments. Transmission complete, the computer announced. Hayes smiled grimly, slumping back in the chair as darkness crept into the edges of her vision. At least she'd given humanity a chance. At least. Light enveloped her, not the searing heat of an explosion, but something cooler, encompassing. The pain in her body intensified, then faded to a distant throb. When her vision cleared, she found herself in an environment unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Crystalline structures pulsed with internal light. The air, if it was air, felt thick, almost gelatinous in her lungs. And standing before her, towering nearly 3 meters tall, was a being that seemed composed of living crystal and flowing energy. Narek studied the human female with all 6 of his sensory organs. She was damaged, leaking the red fluid their kind required for life. Yet her neural patterns showed no sign of surrender or fear. Instead, they indicated calculation, assessment, like a predator, not prey. "You are not what I expected," he said, his thoughts translated through a device specifically designed for human comprehension. Hayes straightened as best she could, ignoring the stabbing pain in her side. "I could say the same about you. I thought you'd just kill me." Death is inefficient when knowledge can be gained. Nyarek moved closer, his crystalline form refracting the light around them. You stayed behind. You sacrificed escape to transmit data. Why? Hayes met his alien gaze steadily. Because that's what humans do. We protect our own, at the cost of individual survival. This is not logical. Logic. Hayes laughed, then winced at the pain it caused. Is that what you think drives us? Narek's form pulsed with colors Hayes couldn't name. If not logic, then what? Hayes considered the alien before her, the enemy who had killed thousands, perhaps millions of humans, who saw her species as nothing but an infestation to be cleared from valuable worlds. Yet here he was, asking questions, seeking understanding. Hope, she said finally. Courage. Love. All the things you can't measure or quantify. Narek's colors shifted again, patterns flowing across his crystalline surface, irrelevant emotional constructs. Are they? Hayes challenged, taking a step closer despite her injuries. Then why am I still fighting? Why haven't you broken us yet, despite your superior technology? For the first time in his long existence, Narek found himself without an immediate response. The human stood before him, damaged and alone, yet emanating a strength that defied rational explanation. It disturbed the ordered patterns of his thoughts. You will help us understand your species, he decided finally. Hayes' expression hardened. I won't betray my people. Your cooperation is not required, Narek stated simply. We have methods. But as the human was led away by drum attendants, Narek found himself troubled by an unfamiliar sensation. Doubt. The Conclave had classified humans as dangerous vermin, to be exterminated before they could spread further into the cosmos. Yet this specimen displayed qualities that contradicted that assessment. Perhaps there was more to understand about these creatures than the Conclave had realized, and perhaps he, Narek, was the one who needed to discover it. The Warrior's Code. Days aboard the Vosari vessel blurred together for Commander Hayes. Her cell, though they wouldn't call it that, was a crystalline chamber that shifted and reformed according to what her captors perceived as her needs. Food appeared at regular intervals, strange gelatinous substances that nonetheless provided nutrition. Her injuries had been treated with technology she couldn't begin to comprehend, accelerating her healing to extraordinary rates. And then there were the questions, endless questions, probing not just for military information, but for understanding of human behavior, motivation, culture, always posed by Narek, the crystalline captain who seemed increasingly fascinated by her responses. Your species values individual autonomy, he observed during one such session. Yet you sacrifice this autonomy for collective benefit. This contradiction defies rational analysis. Hayes sat cross-legged on the floor of her chamber, studying the alien before her. She'd begun to recognize subtle variations in his crystalline patterns, indicators of mood, perhaps, or thought processes. It's not a contradiction, she replied. It's a choice. Choice is what makes us human. Narek's colors shifted to a pattern she'd come to associate with contemplation. Choice implies alternatives, evaluation, selection based on predicted outcomes. But you humans often choose paths that ensure your own destruction. Sometimes the how matters more than the what, Hayes said. Sometimes standing for something is more important than surviving. Your species is irrational, Narek concluded, but the dismissal lacked conviction. Hayes smiled slightly. Maybe. Or maybe we understand something you don't. Later, alone in her chamber, Hayes continued the careful mapping she'd been conducting in her mind. 14 days of captivity had given her ample opportunity to observe Vosari patterns, behaviors, technologies. They believed her isolated, monitored, controlled. They didn't understand that humans were raised in environments filled with predators, from playground bullies to corporate sharks. Observation was a survival skill learned early. She knew now that the ship operated on cycles, periods of heightened and reduced activity. She knew which frequencies of light indicated alert status among the crew. She knew that despite their advanced technology, The Vosari were creatures of rigid pattern and predictability. What she didn't expect was the opportunity that presented itself on the 15th day. The chamber walls pulsed with unfamiliar colors. The constant, subtle vibration that pervaded the vessel shifted, became erratic. Something was wrong. Hayes rose to her feet, alert and ready, when the wall of her chamber suddenly liquefied, opening a passage where none had existed before. She didn't hesitate. She moved. The corridors of the Vosari ship were in chaos. Crystalline entities rushed in coordinated patterns, their movements urgent, their colors flashing in what Hayes recognized as alarm. They paid her little attention, an oversight that told her how serious the situation must be. Following instincts honed through years of combat experience, Hayes made her way toward what she believed to be the command center. Not to escape, there was nowhere to go in deep space, but to understand. Information was survival. What she found was unexpected. The ship's command chamber was a vaulted space of shifting crystalline structures, pulsing with light and energy. And at its center, isolated and under attack, was Nyrek. 3 larger Vosari surrounded him, their forms radiating aggressive patterns Hayes had never seen before. Energy discharges crackled between them, striking Nyrek's form and causing fractures to appear in his crystalline surface. Rebellion, mutiny. The specifics didn't matter. What mattered was that in that moment, Hayes understood something critical about the Vosari. They were not the monolithic entity humanity had believed them to be. They had factions, politics, internal conflicts. And in conflict lay opportunity. Without fully understanding why, acting on instinct rather than calculation, Hayes launched herself into the chamber. She had no weapons, no armor, no advantages except surprise and human unpredictability. It was enough. Her attack on the first Vosari was pure chaos theory in motion, a flying tackle that shouldn't have worked against a being 3 times her mass and composed of living crystal. But the Vosari, used to the ordered patterns of their kind, had no defense against the sheer reckless abandon of a human soldier with nothing to lose. The crystalline entity shattered on impact, fragments scattering across the chamber floor. Hayes rolled to her feet, already moving toward the second attacker. Pain lanced through her arm as energy discharged against her, but she pushed through it, driven by the same force that had kept her fighting on Epsilon 9. Not just survival, but purpose. Nyrek, despite his injuries, moved with surprising speed. Together, they forced the remaining attackers into retreat, securing the command chamber. In the aftermath, as emergency protocols stabilized the ship, Nyrek turned all 6 sensory organs toward Hayes. His crystalline form was damaged, fracture lines running through previously perfect structures, yet he emanated an energy Hayes hadn't seen before. "You assisted me," he stated, confusion evident in his thought patterns. "Against your enemies." Hayes shrugged, wincing at the movement. "They're not my enemies. They're just Vosari like you. You're the only one I know. But I captured you. I destroyed your outpost. By human logic, you should have joined them against me or attempted escape. Maybe human logic isn't what you think it is." Hayes leaned against a crystal formation, suddenly exhausted. What was that about, anyway? Nyrek's colors shifted slowly, thoughtfully. "The Conclave grows impatient with my research. They demand faster progress in the extermination protocols. These were enforcement agents sent to remove me from command. Because you're studying us instead of killing us." Yes. Nyrek's admission was simple, direct. "I have reported that humans are more complex than our initial assessment indicated, that there may be value in understanding your species before determining your fate." Hayes stared at him, realizing the implications. "You've been stalling the genocide. Why?" For a long moment, Nyrek was silent, his crystalline form pulsing with slow, deliberate patterns. When he finally responded, his thoughts seemed carefully chosen. "Because you are not what we expected. You, Commander Hayes, are not what I expected. Your species demonstrates patterns that contradict all our models of evolutionary development. You should be primitive, predictable, focused solely on survival and reproduction. Instead, you create art. You sacrifice yourselves for abstract concepts. You choose paths knowing they lead to your destruction, for reasons we cannot quantify. He moved closer, towering over her. In all our explorations of this galaxy, we have encountered many species. All follow predictable patterns based on their evolutionary history, all except humans. Hayes felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with the alien environment. And that's why you want to exterminate us. Because we don't fit your models. The Conclave believes your unpredictability makes you dangerous, a threat to the ordered expansion of the Vozari. And what do you believe? Narek's colors shifted to patterns Hayes had never seen before. I believe that understanding precedes judgment. I believe that there are questions about your species that remain unanswered. And after today's events, I believe that perhaps the Conclave's fear of unpredictability is itself a weakness. He gestured around them at the command chamber, now secured and functioning normally again. You could have escaped. Instead, you engaged in combat to assist me, your captor. This defies rational analysis. Hayes smiled wearily. That's kind of our thing. In the days that followed, the dynamic between Hayes and Narek shifted fundamentally. She was no longer simply a specimen to be studied, but a representative of her species in what had become, improbably, a diplomatic mission. The rebellion aboard the ship had been more widespread than initially apparent, forcing Narek to confront growing dissent within the Vozari about their approach to humanity. Some, like Narek, questioned the Conclave's extermination order. Others demanded more aggressive action. The Conclave has existed for millennia, Narek explained as they reviewed star charts in the command chamber. Our expansion has always followed the same pattern. Identify viable systems, assess indigenous life forms, clear obstacles to colonization. We have never encountered a species that presented a philosophical challenge rather than a tactical one. Hayes studied the vast map of Vozari territory. So we're the first to make you question your methods. You are the first to demonstrate that unpredictability might be a strength rather than a flaw. Narek's form pulsed with what Hayes had come to recognize as emphasis. Your actions during the rebellion proved this. No Vozari would have made the choices you did. Because they wouldn't have been logical. Because they wouldn't have been considered. Our neural networks process options based on established patterns. Your human mind creates new patterns. Hayes considered this. So what happens now? Your Conclave still wants us extinct. I'm guessing they're not big on changing their minds. The Conclave responds to evidence, Narek countered. I have been gathering it. Your responses, your actions, the data from other human encounters. I believe there is another path forward, one that neither our species has considered. Coexistence, Hayes suggested, skepticism evident in her tone. Something more complex. Narek's colors shifted to a pattern Hayes associated with intensity. Symbiosis. The Vozari excel at order, pattern, efficiency. Humans excel at adaptation, creativity, conceptual leaps. Together we'd be more than the sum of our parts. Hayes finished, understanding dawning. A partnership. It will not be easy, Narek cautioned. Many among both our species will resist. The Conclave has never revised a judgment of this magnitude, and humans have shown little willingness to cooperate with those who have attacked them. Hayes couldn't argue with that assessment. The wounds between their species were deep, the trust non-existent. And yet, history is full of enemies who became allies, she said slowly. It just takes someone willing to take the first step, to see the other side as something more than a threat. As you did in the command chamber during the rebellion, as you did when you questioned the Conclave's judgment. They regarded each other across the expanse of stars displayed between them, two beings so fundamentally different in biology, psychology, history, yet in this moment, connected by something neither could fully articulate. 3 months later, a Vosari delegation entered Earth's solar system, not as conquerors, but as emissaries, their massive ships holding position at the system's edge in a gesture of restraint that human military leaders recognized and cautiously respected. On the lead vessel, Commander Elia Hayes stood beside Captain Nyrek as they prepared the first official communication between their species. No longer prisoner and captor, but representatives of a possible future neither had imagined. They may not listen, Hayes warned, knowing the fear and anger that had spread through human space following the early Vosari attacks. They may not, Nyrek agreed, his crystalline form refracting the light of Earth's distant sun. But you have taught me that improbability is not impossibility. That paths exist beyond those we can predict. Hayes smiled, the expression still strange and fascinating to her Vosari companion. That's the most human thing I've ever heard you say. As the communication channel opened, revealing the tense faces of Earth's leaders, Hayes stepped forward. She had no illusions about the difficulty of the path ahead, the suspicion and hostility they would face from both sides, but she had seen firsthand the alternative, endless war between species that had more to offer each other than destruction. This is Commander Elia Hayes of Earth, she began, her voice steady and clear. I bring you an opportunity unprecedented in human history, the chance to turn an enemy into an ally, to replace fear with understanding. Behind her, Nyrek pulsed with colors that no human had yet learned to interpret fully: hope, uncertainty, determination. Emotions that, until meeting Hayes, he would have dismissed as irrelevant to rational beings. In that moment, aboard a ship hovering at the edge of humanity's home system, something new began. Not merely a truce or an alliance, but a recognition that across the vast differences between their species lay possibilities neither had been capable of imagining alone. The paradox of prey had become the promise of partnership.